Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the global food supply chain to uncover the hidden financial risks buried deep within agricultural networks. And more importantly, we're looking at how the world's biggest companies are literally being forced to measure and report those exact risks. If you've ever wanted to understand how the food sitting on your table connects to the stability of global markets, you are in the exact right place. To actually see these risks the way an investor does, we've got to look at the official rulebook, the SASB standards, which are now managed by the ISSB. Now, this isn't just some fluffy PR guideline. This is the rigorous accounting standard used globally to mandate how food and beverage companies disclose sustainability risks. We're talking about real, tangible environmental factors that directly hit a company's cash flows, their cost of capital, and ultimately, their bottom line. Okay, let's dive right into this. Put your investor hat on for a second. Imagine you're evaluating a massive agricultural giant. How do you know if they're truly prepared to survive a catastrophic crop failure, a massive regional drought, or even just a sudden drastic shift in what consumers want to eat? You can't just take their word for it, right? You need hard data. You need to know exactly how they manage the unpredictable. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, harvesting sustainability data. Second, navigating the GMO landscape. Third, climate change and key crops. Fourth, the water scarcity threat. And fifth, future-proofing the food chain. Section 1. Harvesting sustainability data. Translating corporate codes. For a long time, environmental risks were just considered qualitative. You know, these unquantifiable, fuzzy factors that were really hard to pin down on a balance sheet. Well, the SASB standard completely changes the game by forcing agricultural entities to translate those ambiguous threats into concrete, trackable metrics. Today, we're zooming in on 3 absolute high-stakes accounting codes. First up, FBAG 430B.1, which tracks strategies for managing GMOs. Next, FBAG 4408.1, identifying climate risks and opportunities for principal crops. And finally, FBAG 4408.2, tracking the exact percentage of agricultural products sourced from highly water-stressed regions. These 3 codes right here, they make up the ultimate risk radar. Moving on to Section 2, navigating the GMO landscape, threat versus strategy. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are fascinating because they represent both a massive technological advantage and a severe market risk at the exact same time. On one hand, GMO technology has given us incredible improvements in crop yield through disease and drought-resistant strains. But as an investor, you've got to look at the flip side. Companies are required to disclose the actual jurisdictions that restrict, ban, or suspend imports of their products due to GMO regulations. Secondly, they have to lay out the legal and operational risks associated with required GMO labeling laws. And third, they must account for sudden changes in consumer preferences. Because, let's face it, consumer concerns about the perceived health, environmental, or social impacts of GMOs can wipe out product demand literally overnight. But here's the thing. SSB doesn't just want a list of fears. They require companies to prove they actually have a plan. The standard mandates a specific, detailed discussion of the strategies used to manage these GMO risks. Because if a company can effectively communicate with consumers and adapt to shifting regulatory trends, they don't just dodge reputational damage and revenue loss, they can actually capture brand new market opportunities. It's a real game changer. All right, Section 3, climate change and key crops, assessing the ecosystem. Let's move along and see how this builds. We're zooming out from genetic science to the macro threat of a changing climate. But think about it. When an agricultural giant buys thousands of different ingredients, how do you even begin to measure climate risk across a global supply chain? The standard solves this brilliantly by narrowing the focus entirely down to what they call principal crops. These are strictly defined as crops that accounted for 10% or more of consolidated revenue in any of the last 3 fiscal years. This is crucial to understand. The standard doesn't care about the tiny dash of spice in a product. They care about the crops that make or break the entire business model. I want you to keep this 10% threshold burned into your memory. If a crop, whether it's cultivated directly by the company, grown on a contract basis, or just sourced as a commodity on the open market, hits this 10% revenue threshold in any of the last 3 years, boom, it instantly triggers intense climate risk reporting. It becomes a primary target on that investor's risk radar. Once those principal crops are identified, companies are on the hook to describe the risks presented to them by specific climate change scenarios. They literally have to model for reductions in water availability, shifts in viable crop regions, pest migration, and extreme weather events. They even have to discuss the timeline over which these risks are expected to hit and the potential ripple effects through their supply chain. And this slide right here brilliantly illustrates the difference between slapping a financial band-aid on a problem versus building actual resilience. SASB requires companies to disclose their strategies to either alleviate or adapt to these risks. So companies have to disclose their alleviation strategies, things like buying crop insurance, investing in financial hedging instruments, or diversifying their supply chain. But, and this is key, they also must show true biological adaptation strategies. We're talking about improving ecosystem management and biodiversity, developing tolerant crop varieties, and optimizing the timing of planting and harvesting. As an investor, you absolutely want to see companies doing both. Which brings us to Section 4, the water scarcity threat, tracking every drop.
Look, you simply cannot grow those principal crops or run giant processing facilities without reliable access to water. The agricultural industry is uniquely exposed to water availability and regulatory access. So how does the standard actually measure this? Well, companies must disclose the percentage of agricultural products sourced from regions with high or extremely high baseline water stress. And here's the kicker. This is calculated by cost. It's the cost of agricultural products purchased from suppliers in these stressed regions, divided by the total cost of all agricultural products. Framing it this way shows the true financial exposure a company has to droughts and water shortages.
But what exactly makes a region quote-unquote water stressed? SASB removes all the guesswork here by mandating the use of the World Resources Institute, or WRI, aqueduct tool. Under this tool, high baseline water stress is scientifically defined as 40 to 80%, and extremely high is anything greater than 80%. This creates a completely standardized, objective measure of environmental vulnerability across the board. So the crucial point is, how does this tracking actually happen in practice? It's a precise accounting procedure. First, the company must identify its Tier 1 suppliers. Just to clarify, these are the suppliers that transact directly with the entity. Next, they map the exact locations where those Tier 1 suppliers withdraw and consume water against the WRI aqueduct tool. And finally, they calculate the percentage of their total sourcing cost that is at risk. They have to trace that water risk straight back to their direct suppliers. No hiding.
Finally, Section 5, future-proofing the food chain. Let's zoom back out for a moment. We've dug into some highly technical metrics today for ingredient sourcing, GMO management, identifying principal crops, and tracking water stress. But why go through all this trouble? What's the overarching strategic goal of this accounting standard for the agricultural sector? The answer is perfectly summarized right in the standard's own industry description. Listen to this direct quote. Managing sustainability risks within the supply chain is critical to securing a reliable raw material supply and reducing the risk of price increases and volatility over the long term. That is the bottom line. Whether it's managing a controversial genetically modified crop, predicting where pests are migrating next, or tracking literally every drop of water from a Tier 1 supplier, it is all about mitigating price volatility and ensuring that the global food supply actually survives.
We've seen exactly how the investor's risk radar works now, and the intense level of detail these agricultural giants are expected to provide. They can't no longer hide behind vague sustainability pledges. They have to show the math. So I'll leave you with this to think about. The next time you walk down the grocery aisle, ask yourself, are your favorite food brands truly prepared for tomorrow's climate? Look up their SASB disclosures, and you just might find the answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.